In 1993, a young Zimbabwean engineer walked into the offices of the government of Zimbabwe with a proposal. He wanted to build a mobile telephone, not a factory, not a mine, not a tobacco farm, a phone network. The men in those offices laughed. Some of them genuinely could not stop laughing. Honestly, fair enough. This was Zimbabwe in 1993. Most people did not even have a landline. The idea of millions of Zimbabweans walking around with mobile phones was the kind of a thing that would get people say you are mentally disturbed. But the government wasn't just laughing, they felt threatened. This young man, this 32-year-old with a dream and a briefcase, had just accidentally stumbled into an idea that would change everything. What followed was not a business story, it was war. 5 years, 2 Supreme Court battles, death threats, bankruptcy, prayer. Underline the word prayer there. It's very important in this story. His name is Strive Masiwa, and this is how he became one of the richest, most powerful men Africa has ever produced.
Let me do it. They said, well, no, you can't do that because then you would violate our monopoly. I said, so how can you have a monopoly in something you don't do? So I did the smartest thing, which was hire a lawyer, right? I went to a lawyer. I said, do they really have a monopoly? He says, no, they don't.
January 29, 1961, Masiwa is born in Mtoko, a small rural district in what was then Rhodesia, not Zimbabwe, but Rhodesia. Rhodesia, a country where by law the color of your skin determined the quality of your life, the school you attended, the job you could hold, and in many cases whether you lived or died. His father worked in the mines. His mother ran a small business. They were not wealthy people, no, but they were ambitious people. The kind of parents who look at their children and see not what they are, but what they could become. And they saw something in Strive Masiwa. In the mid-70s, the Liberation War was burning through the countryside. Rural Zimbabwe was a battlefield. It was not a safe time to be a child in Mtoko rural. Strive Masiwa's parents made a decision that would change everything. They sent him away to Scotland, abroad. He was very young when he went to the UK. Something happened to him in the UK that did not happen to most kids from his village back home. He saw the future. He saw technology. He saw that the gap between Africa and the West was not a gap of intelligence or ability. It was a gap of access. Access to tools, to capital, to systems. And in his mind, a question began to form that would define the next 50 years of his life. And the question was, what if Africa had access to all of this? He then returned to Zimbabwe, now independent, now called Zimbabwe, to complete his secondary schooling. He was focused, serious. He was the kind of a student who made other students uncomfortable. Then came a time that he went back abroad to finish his university level. He went to University of Wales, where he studied electrical engineering. Not medicine, not law, but engineering. Because he already knew the future would be built, not argued. He graduated in 1983 with his engineering degree. Then he did something almost nobody expected. He came back home. Zimbabwe in 1983 was a country full of hope. 2 years of independence, a new flag, a new president who the world believed would lead Africa into a golden era. The country was building, and Strive Masiwa wanted to be part of the rebuilding. He got a job with the Post and Telecommunications Corporation of Zimbabwe, PTC, the state-owned telephone company. And for a few years, he learned, he watched, he studied. He understood how systems worked, how they failed, how they could be improved. And eventually, he got bored. Because that's the thing about entrepreneurs. You cannot keep them in a government job. You can hire them, yes. You can pay them, yes. But their brains are always running calculations and solving problems that aren't on the agenda at all. Strive Masiwa was not capable of sitting still and being average. So in 1988, he did what every sane person with a young family, no capital and huge ambition does. He quit his government job and started a company. The company was called Retrofit. Retrofit was a telecommunication engineering company. Masiwa used his PTC contact, his engineering expertise, and his understanding of Zimbabwe's infrastructure gaps to build a company that provided telecom solutions to businesses and institutions. Zimbabwe in the late 1980s was still a heavily state-controlled economy. Robert Mugabe's government had a tight grip on most industries. Telecommunications especially was seen as a strategic national asset. You did not mess with the PTC territory. But Masiwa found his lane. He wasn't competing with PTC. He was servicing the gap that PTC could not or would not service. Businesses that needed installations, Retrofit provided them. I hope you're learning something here. In the business world, it's about providing a solution to a problem, and you're good to go. Strive Masiwa's company grew, not overnight. Early 1990s, Retrofit was a successful operation. Masiwa had a team, clients, revenue. He had built something real with his own hands. But he was watching something happening in the world outside Zimbabwe. Something that was about to change everything. And that something was mobile phones. In the early 1990s, GSM, the technology that would power mobile telephone networks, was being deployed across Europe. Countries were issuing licenses, networks were being built. And Strive Masiwa, with his engineering brain and his dream of giving Africa access to the same tools as the West, saw exactly what was coming. He sat down and did the mathematics. Zimbabwe in 1993 had millions on waiting list for landlines that would take years to be installed. In some rural areas, there was literally no telephone infrastructure at all. Millions of people, business people, farmers, doctors, families completely cut off from telecommunication. Masiwa went to the government of Zimbabwe. He presented his proposal. He said, "Let me build Zimbabwe's first mobile telephone network. Let me bring this technology to this country. Let me serve the people that PTC cannot reach." And the government of Zimbabwe said, "No." Now, this is the part of the story where most people would have gone home. Think about what Masiwa was up against. He was a private individual, one man, one company, going up against the full apparatus of the Zimbabwean state, the government of Robert Mugabe, ministers who had fought a liberation war and were accustomed to winning, men who were the law, men who were not simple on the face. One look at you, you'd shiver. And this 32-year-old engineer had just told them they were wrong. He wanted an opportunity. He wanted a piece of the pie. The government's position was simple. The Constitution of Zimbabwe gave the state a monopoly on telecommunication. Only the Posts and Telecommunication Corporation could operate telephone services. There was no room for private operators. End of conversation. But Masiwa had also read the Constitution. He knew his rights, and he absolutely believed that the Constitution also protected freedom of expression, and that freedom of expression, properly interpreted, included the right to communicate, which meant the state monopoly on telecommunication might actually be unconstitutional. It was an audacious argument. It was the kind of argument that could end a man in Zimbabwe by that time, not now, but by that time. And Strive Masiwa dared to dream. He hired lawyers, he filed papers, he went to court. The government came for him. If any government is to come for you, it's over for you. You are done. A government doesn't play. What happened over the next 5 years was not a gentleman legal dispute. There was gnashing of teeth, at least on the side of Masiwa. This was not two parties presenting arguments in a courtroom and shaking hands at the end. This was a campaign, a deliberate, sustained campaign that would destroy Strive Masiwa as a businessman and as a man in general. At the end of the day, government contracts that Retrofit had been expecting disappeared. Banks that had previously been cooperative became suddenly less cooperative. The message was not subtle. The message was stand down or we will take everything from you. Now I need you to put yourself in this man's position for a moment. These are the times him and his wife Titi would hold 24-hour prayer sessions openly, and it's reported he fasted 40 days countless times. The man cried to God. He cried to his God. You have a company, you have employees, you have a family. Strive and his wife Titi had young children at this point, and the most powerful institution in your country has decided that you are a problem to be solved. His company started struggling. Retrofit struggled. The legal bills are mounting. Your savings are draining. You're losing. Your wife is watching all of this, and she kneels down with you to pray and fast for 5 good years. Some would ask, what keeps a man going in that situation? Well, for Strive Masiwa, the answer was faith. He has said in his interviews that there were moments when he genuinely did not know if they would survive, financially survive. He was not a man of great wealth, fighting from a position of comfort. He was a man bleeding money, watching his company slowly suffocate. The government strategy was clear, not to win right away, but to exhaust him, to bleed him dry financially and emotionally until he gives up. In 1997, 4 years into the battle, the Supreme Court of Zimbabwe made a landmark ruling. The state monopoly on telecommunications was unconstitutional. One man, one company, one legal argument against the full weight of the Zimbabwean state. And you won. You won. Strive Masiwa won the battle. The Supreme Court ruling meant that the government was now required to open the telecommunications sector to private operators. It was one of the most significant constitutional victories in Zimbabwean legal history. It was won by a guy who started his working life at PTC, got bored, and quit to start a company called Retrofit. Life is something else. But here's the thing, winning a Supreme Court ruling and actually getting your operating license in Zimbabwe in 1997 are two different things. By 1998, 5 years after he first walked into those government offices with his proposal, 5 years of fighting, of near bankruptcy, of sleepless nights, Econet Wireless, his company, finally received its operating license. 5 years. For context, in 5 years, a child goes from kindergarten to grade 5. In 5 years, you can learn a language. Strive Masiwa spent 5 years fighting his own government for the right to save its people, and he won. When Econet launched in Zimbabwe in 1998, something remarkable happened. People came, they flooded in because there had been a demand all along. Zimbabweans who had been waiting years for landlines, business people who had been limited by communication barriers, students, farmers, mothers, everyone, they all came to Econet. Econet grew rapidly. It built infrastructure across the country. Towers, networks, coverage reaching into rural areas that PTC had never bothered with because there was no profit. But Masiwa was not just thinking about profit, he was thinking about what he had always been thinking about since he was a kid in Scotland. Staring at technology and asking, why not Africa? He wanted to build something transformative. Here's something that economists have noted across Africa now. Mobile telecommunications has done more for poverty reduction than almost any government program in history. That's not an accident. When you give a farmer access to market price information, he stops being cheated by middlemen. When you give a mother access to a phone, she can call a doctor, call an ambulance, call for help. Communication is infrastructure, and Masiwa understood this before most African governments did. But Masiwa wasn't done with just voice calls. In 2011, Econet Zimbabwe launched EcoCash, mobile money. Send money, receive money, pay bills, buy airtime, all through your phone. no bank account required. By the mid-2020, EcoCash had tens of millions of registered users, and all of this, it made Econet and Masiwa extremely wealthy. Zimbabwe was just the beginning, my people. Masiwa's vision was never limited to one country. He had always been thinking about Africa in general, the whole continent, 1.4 billion people, the youngest population in the world, the fastest growing mobile market on earth. He moved across the continent with the same energy he had brought to Zimbabwe. This man, who once could not get a single license in his home country, built a telecommunication and technology empire that spans the African continent. He employs tens of thousands of people. He has created wealth for shareholders, suppliers, agents, and communities across 20 countries. Now let's talk about the money, because this is, after all, the question that brought you here. Forbes have estimated Masiwa's net worth at 2.2 billion, making him one of Africa's wealthiest individuals. But here is what makes Masiwa's genuinely unusual among Africa's wealthy: the way he made his money. Strive Masiwa did not inherit a mine. He did not receive a government contract in exchange for political loyalty. He built everything with a huge backup from the master himself, Jesus Christ. Thank you guys for watching this far. I'm kindly grateful that you watched it this far. I'm actually filming this video in the middle of the night. So if you're watching my videos for the first time, I'm kindly asking if you can subscribe and like the video. I'm grateful for the amazing support. Thank you.